heroes and there are legends. Heroes come and go. Legends never die. We usually say that you cannot become a legend before death. These are living legends. If the legends fall silent, who will teach the children of our ways? Sun Coaches Podcast, Season 5, brought to you by Titan Sensor, is proud to present The Legends. Sun Coaches is proud to partner with Titan Sports for the next 4 seasons on Sun Coaches Podcast. Titan GPS delivers technological superiority and improved player performance through wearable GPS made for high school football and strength and conditioning. From speed training to athlete recruit to workload enhancement, Titan is the easy-to-use yet comprehensive GPS tool to get it done. There's no minimum to get started, and Titan will walk you through every step to success. Message us on X at Titan Sensor to learn more and get in touch. Welcome to Sun Coaches Podcast, Season 5, the Legend Series, and I've got a true legend with us today. He's won a pile of games in this state and 2 state championships. The head coach at Dublin High School, Coach Roger Holmes. Thanks for being on with me.
Hey, buddy, it's my pleasure, and I don't know about any of that legend stuff, but I have been around a long time.
Well, I know we'll get to when you got here, but where did you grow up, Coach?
Coach, I grew up in a little old bitty town called Westmoreland, Tennessee. It's in northern Middle Tennessee, right up on the Kentucky line, a small rural town that put the wing tee offense in an open date of my, sophomore year. And all I've ever done since then has been involved in the wing tee.
So when you were growing, it was a small school, I would imagine.
Yes, sir. Yes.
So you probably played more than just football.
Football, basketball, baseball, and loved all 3 of them. Whatever season it was the most important thing to me at that time. But my football coaches we had the football weightlifting class, so that kind of formed my attitude and how we go about things here. We want our kids to be in weightlifting during the school day, if at all possible, so they can go play whatever sport they want to when school's out and stay competitive year-round.
So at a small school, your football coaches were probably the basketball coaches, the baseball coach. They probably coached y'all at everything.
They coach baseball. Yeah. Well, actually, a couple of years there, one of the assistant football coaches was the head basketball coach. So, yeah, they kind of had their hands on me all the way through.
Well, that's good. Did you get an opportunity to play college ball after high school?
I went to Middle Tennessee State University, and I only played over there for 2 years. I was a walk-on, but played for Coach Boots Donnelly when he first came to Middle Tennessee. His first spring was my senior year in high school, and so his first real team, I was on it at MTSU, and at 5'8", 150 pounds, it was hard to get on the field.
So did you know you were going to be a coach when you went to college, or did you go there to do something else?
That's all I ever wanted to do. My plans were to be a coach. I'd hope to be able to play in college and be more successful on the field than I was. But, yes, I knew probably by the time I was a sophomore in high school that coaching's what I wanted to do. Chris, my high school coaches were invaluable in helping me grow as a young man. I lost my father. It was an automobile accident when I was 10. And the people that were my coaches had a vast, vast influence on me as a young person.
So they pretty much raised you as a young, as far as.
Yeah. They
school, during the school day anyway.
That's for sure. Yes, sir.
Kept you straight and out of trouble.
Well, I remember, one of those funniest stories was that this was back in the day, when they used the Board of Education. Some people called it a paddle. And the football coach told anybody that back then you got a citizenship grade. And if you got an F in citizenship, there were 3 licks coming your way. And so I went in one day and I had a B in citizenship. And the coach told me, he said, you need to grab your ankles. I said, whoa, coach. I ain't got no F. He says, well, my quarterbacks don't get B's. I forgot to tell you. And so I took my 3 licks.
The leader wasn't going to have no B.
Yeah, he wasn't going to have no B. So that was pretty good.
So what was your first job coming out of college, teaching and coaching?
I went right back to that high school. My first 2 years of coaching, I went back to Westmoreland, and I coached there those first 2 years. And Coach, I'm a goal-oriented guy, and I had set my goals that I wanted an opportunity to be a head football coach before I turned 30. And after a couple of years there at that very small school, right or wrong, I made the decision that for me to have the widest opportunity to be a head coach, I needed to go somewhere and coach in the largest classification. Now, some of the best coaches I know are in small schools because they have to do it all, but I'm sitting there thinking, well, when I walk into a 6A school and that principal or AD or them are talking to you, in the back of their mind, I felt like they would say, well, this guy's not ready to coach at this level because all he's ever done has been in a small school. So I left Westmoreland after 2 years, and I went to work at Beach High School, which was in the same county, but it was in the largest classification of schools at that time in Tennessee, which was 3A. There were only 3 classifications, but I also went to work for a guy by the name of Herschel Moore. And Herschel Moore was considered the number 1 wing T guy behind Ted Kempsky in the country. And I really had a phenomenal experience working for him in 6 years. I was his defensive coordinator and coached an offensive position as well with the running backs and quarterbacks. And he moved on to Cumberland University as their head football coach, and then they made me the head football coach at Beach. And I did that for 11 years. The first 6 years, I was the head baseball coach there.
So how did that go, your first head coaching job? Did you make it in under 30?
Yes, I was 29, actually, when I took over there as the head football coach. That program had only had 2 coaches prior to me. It was a school that was built because of overcrowdingness in 2 other schools. So just it was built out in a crossroads. There's no town there. The bigger town was Hendersonville, and then you had Gallatin and White House. Kind of right out in the middle of those 3 towns, they built Beach High School. Their first coach at Beach High School was a guy by the name of Bob Cummings. Coach Cummings was on the staff, that well-known staff that Bear Bryant had when he was coaching at Kentucky. And then Coach Cummings went and coached for the New Orleans Saints. And he ended up leaving Beach, and Herschel Moore took the head coaching job. And Coach Moore is in the Hall of Fame in the state of Tennessee as a high school coach. And then I became their 3rd coach. And when we took the job, even with that quality of coaches, because building a program from scratch is hard. It just is no tradition, no town, those type things. But that school at that time had a losing record for the history of their school. And when we left there, they had gotten over into the positive side when I left and came to Dublin.
So how many did y'all win big there, or did you just get them?
Well, we were 70. My time there, I think, was 74 wins, 59 losses, but we won the first and second region championships in the largest classification during that time. Made it to the state semifinals there one year. It was a unique situation in the sense that we were the smallest school in the largest classification.
Right, which is always rough.
Which was tough, but we got it in a position that it was really on solid ground. And I think maybe 5 years after I came to Georgia, they finally won their first state championship there. Done a great job. The school now is a consistent winner in football, and they just, have done a great job of continuing to build that program.
Well, and I remember when you came to Georgia, it was a year or two after I had gotten started, and I don't think you'd mind me saying this. You came in the middle of the summer, if I remember, or just about nearabouts.
I got hired the last week of June.
Yeah, and then nobody for the younger coaches out there listening that think that people just get handed great situations. Nobody wanted the Dublin job when Coach Holmes came and took it.
Well, they didn't at that point in time. The story goes on that one. Sam Bars, who's a phenomenal person and a great football coach, had been at Dublin for 12 years. He played for the state championship in 1996. And from 96 to 2002, Dublin had not won a playoff game. The year prior to me coming here, they were 4-6 and just struggling. The program had kind of lost its edge a little bit, and things weren't going real well. And they actually, when they let Coach Bars go, they hired a guy named Kevin Sullivan out of Jacksonville, Florida. And I didn't even know about Dublin at that time, and the job was open, and I hadn't applied for it. And Coach Sullivan came in. They went to spring practice, and people that were still here at that time, and one's now my superintendent, Dr. Fred Williams, was on that staff, and he said the third day of spring practice, they had 11 kids total show up. And Coach Sullivan went in, dropped his keys on the desk, and told the guys, he says, I'm going back to Florida. So now all of a sudden it's mid-May, and Dublin doesn't have a coach. So I tell people, but it's probably true. Chris, I tried for 5 or 6 years to get head coaching jobs in Georgia. I think I counted it up one time. I had been to Georgia on 14 different job interviews over a 5 or 6 year period. 3 or 4 of those, I was brought back for second interviews and so on and so forth. Now, all of them, with the exception of Perry High School, were all Atlanta North, and got to the table multiple times, but never had that job opportunity to move to Georgia. And I tell everybody, nobody, like you're saying, nobody wanted the Dublin job, I don't think. I came down, I did the first interview. They asked me to come back for a second one and bring my wife. And it was my understanding there was supposed to be 2 candidates they interviewed, and I think whoever the second one was bailed on them and didn't show up. So they didn't have any choice. They had to offer me the job.
And you came in, and y'all didn't hardly have any ball players out there.
Yeah,
and tell everybody how that first year went.
Well, the first year, I mean, we get in June. We're staff meeting every morning, bringing the kids in Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday nights. I'd hop in the car, go back to Tennessee, get the house packed, help the family get things going, turn back around Sunday morning, drive back to Dublin, which is about a 6.5, 7-hour trip. But anyway, I never had more than 20 individuals show up for any workout or practice. And the superintendent now, Dr. Fred Williams, he and I rode around town trying to find all the kids that had been playing football and get them back and get them involved. And we loaded up, took them to South Georgia College to football camp, took about 60. And when we got back from camp, I think 44, 45 is what we had left. And but that football team kind of got on a roll and things got to going good. And we ended that year 14-1, lost to Screven County in the state championship game.
That is one of my favorite stories ever
Well,
in my career coaching. I mean, because I remember when it happened, everybody was like, when he got here, he had 20 people. They played for a state championship. You can do it.
Well, we had good people now. We had some good players. One of the things I think that we had to do was we had to convince our people that hard work pays dividends. And, we had to let some guys go. We had to establish the accountability to be a high school football player. Now, offensively, we were running the wing tee, but it wasn't the wing tee that everybody knew in Georgia. The wing tee book, if you will, was the University of Delaware, Coach Kempsky. And Coach Raymond is the head coach. Ted Kempsky was the OC, and they actually used to come to West Georgia College every summer and put on a camp at West Georgia, which was a wing tee camp. And back then, I would venture to say 60% of the schools in the state of Georgia were running some form of wing tee. But ours was different. And so I think the first year it made it kind of easy because we were doing things that people had never had to defend before in the wing tee. Well, our second year is not one to be proud of, thank goodness for the first year, because our second year we were 3-7. But I also made a decision that remember we started with 60 something, we finished the year with 42. Anybody that bailed on us, quit, left, or whatever, we didn't let them come back out. We rolled with a group of freshmen and sophomores and took some licks. But when those kids in 2006, they got a state championship rank too.
Yeah, me and my wife were at that game. We sat on the hill at the Shamrock Bowl.
Yeah, that was the last year that Georgia High School had ties in the state championship. Our game with Charlton County ended in a tie, and then later on that night, I think it may have been Roswell or Peachtree Ridge. That game ended in a tie, and Georgia High School called enough heat that that'll no longer happen anymore in the state of Georgia.
Right. I remember it. We sure did. We sat on the hill over there at the Shamrock Bowl.
That was a great environment, wasn't it?
Oh, it was packed out. There were people everywhere, and it was just a heck of a football game.
Yeah, that's one of the few pictures that I display. If you come in my house, there's nothing here that represents what our football teams have accomplished. If you come in my office, there's nothing hanging on the walls, and that's just kind of a philosophy of mine. When I'm done and I retire, we'll put all that on the wall. But the second side of that is, if you're worried about what you've done in the past, you're never going to worry about what you do in the future. So the only thing that's displayed really in that field house is there is a picture of that football stadium. At that state championship game, it's a big panoramic view, and the place is absolutely packed. Well, the story behind that was when I drove down to interview. I'd never been to Dublin in my life, didn't know where it was when I drove down here. And my wife really didn't want me to come because we didn't have the money. So there wasn't going to be a hotel room rented, and there wasn't going to be nowhere to stop and eat. I put some peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and a thermos in my car. I drove, I did the interview, and I drove home. And so when I got to the stadium, I walked down to the field, and I saw this gentleman painting the press box. Young girl there painting the press box, and 7 or 8 good-looking young men, high school age kids, sitting on a trailer doing nothing. Little did I know that was called the paint crew. So when I get down to the stadium, I've got a tie on. It's about 50 minutes maybe before I'm supposed to go interview, and the guy's painting the press box, and he looks over and he says, "Coach, you down here to interview for this job?" I said, "Yes, sir." "Where are you from?" I said, "Well, I'm from Tennessee." "Oh, y'all play any football up there?" I said, "Maybe a little bit." "Well, you ever win any games?" I said, "Maybe more than our share." "Well, what kind of offense you run?" I said, "Well, we run the wing T." And he told me, he said, "Well, you might as well get back in your car and head back north, because the last guy ran the wing T down here is running buses now." So and I talked to the players a little bit. I said, "Y'all fill this place up?" They said, "Oh, no, Coach, you can't fill the Shamrock Bowl up." That's why I have that picture on the wall.
Well, it was filled that day.
Because you can fill the Shamrock Bowl up. If you have a good enough football team, the people are going to come watch them. And that's why I have that picture, is because I was told that could not happen. And so that's one of the things that stands out to me the most during my time here was, yeah, we did. And that not just the bleachers, because we brought in extra portable bleachers that were sitting above the stadium. And then, like you said, the hill was full, people sitting in the grass on the hill. So it was a phenomenal atmosphere.
So you win the first state championship. That had to be surreal after you'd been told you couldn't do it. You couldn't fill the stadium up. You couldn't run. That you'd be running buses, or at least the last fella was that tried to run the wing T. And so you get that first one, and for the city of Dublin, it was just
well,
awesome.
and here's the funny story on that one. Like we said a minute ago, it ended in a tie. Well, we had a staff meeting. I met with all my coaches on Wednesday afternoon after practice, and we're just going over normal scenario things that you need to talk about. And I had read the rule book, and it said in there that if the state championship game ends in a tie, both teams would be declared a state champion. And my staff didn't know it. I didn't know it. And they'd been coaching in this state for a long time. So I said, "All right, guys, here's the scenario. We're down by 1. There's 13 seconds to go on the clock, and we score, and we're down 1. I said, "Do we go for 2 and take a chance of throwing away a state championship, or do you kick it? Because we didn't make the rules. This is the rules. And winning state championship don't just happen." I said, the state themselves think if 2 teams play to a tie in the state championship game, just name them both co-state champions. So we go through and we made the decision that night that we'll kick it. Well, as we get into that game, you probably remember Dublin dominated the first half. Charlton County dominated the second half. And we've got the ball. It was 3rd and 4, and we run a play, and we pick up 2 at about midfield. Well, there's about 2.5 minutes to go, and we've got all 3 timeouts left. We knew if we stopped them, we'd have the ball back around midfield, or they might, if they're trying to go down and score, they might throw us a pick. So we chose to punt, down it inside the 1. Charlton's quarterback, God bless me, I can't think of his name right now, but I know it very well. He went on to MTSU and was the first Division I quarterback that threw for 1,500, ran for 1,000 in the same year in college football. But he scrambled, pulled one down, and picked up a first down. And on the last play of the game, we're trying to use our free kick option. And they kicked a line drive punt over our head on the last play of the game, and that's how it ended. So I get home, and there's a message on my answering machine. Whole family sitting there listening the whole 9 yards, and some guy proceeds to call me everything under the sun and cuss you out real good and all that kind of stuff, and put a bitter taste in your mouth, because nobody knew how to act. Our kids had been declared a state champion, and people weren't happy about it. So it was really a bad taste, So the state championship game that we won in 19 with Brooks County kind of gave us the opportunity to have that feeling of total accomplishment.
And I've talked to a bunch of guys on here, and they always say that, when you play for the first one, whether you tie, I know it was different for you because you had to go through it, but you savor it and you remember it because you don't know if you're ever going to get back there again.
That's the whole thing.
And
Nobody
it took you 13
knows.
years to get back to an opportunity to win it.
You
came close and made some runs.
That's why that decision was made on that Wednesday, because we'd lost the one at Screven. So you don't ever know if you're going back. That was in 2002. In 2006, you got another chance. And I told them, I said, guys, it's easy for me to line up and go for two. Everybody said, the coach got a lot of guts. He went for two. Well, so what? What if you don't get it? You took the right to be called the state championship away from every assistant coach, every parent, and every player on that team because you weren't willing to take the heat for kicking the extra point. I was willing to take that heat so that if everybody on our football team walked out of there with a state championship ring, we'd accomplish what we set out to do.
That's right. And I've had some young coaches tell us, we were sitting in the hospitality suite at one of the Coach of the Year clinics down in Orlando, and they were like, I don't believe I'd take a tie. And all the old coaches in there, yes, you would.
Yeah.
Yeah, you would. Well, you take it, and you'd be happy with it.
If that's what the rules that you didn't have anything to do with making laid out, so that's a tough situation. But I can tell you this, ever since that day, how the officials used to come ask you if the game was tied at the end. Do you want it to end in a tie or do you want to go overtime? I can assure you, I tell them I've been in the only tie game I ever want to be in. So
That's right.
We'll have a winner or a loser when we leave tonight.
So what was that 19 year like? Just, going through that year and just being able to kind of put an exclamation point on it for you.
Well, I think the most amazing thing about it was the young man that ended up playing fullback for us that year, Jaquez Evans, we called him Donut. Jaquez had never been a running back till that year, and he played some tight end. He was a linebacker, defensive end. I had another good fullback prior to him named Jermaine Cooley that went on and played at UT Martin. So we moved Jaquez back there. Little did we know that he was going to run for 2,500 yards and 40 touchdowns. But our quarterback was a first-year starter at quarterback and did a good job for us. But our forte was running that football. We could run it and run it well. And, the funny story about that season, I guess, was although we called 3 different passes in the semifinal game and one in the state championship, quarterback pulled them down. We never threw it. So everybody's talking about, Dublin won the state championship, scoring 40-something points in the semifinals and finals and never attempted a pass. That's kind of unique. My career, I think right now is I might have a trivia question for when I'm dead and gone that nobody else can say they have in the state of Georgia. What coach has won one, lost one, and tied one?
Yeah, I think you'd be right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, because I don't.
One lost,
you got
one
me
and
stumped.
tied one.
Yeah.
So that would be the coach at Dublin.
That'd be you.
Yes, sir.
And you've had a bunch of great coaches on your staffs over the years and come and go, and a bunch of great players at Dublin come through, and seen a bunch of great players, because when you're running an elite level program, you play elite level competition, and you get to see a bunch of youngins that are just really good football players, not only coaching them, but just seeing them across the way too. Who are some of the best you've seen or coached?
Well, I tell everybody all the time, I had one player that played for me up in the state of Tennessee. As a young man named Kente Sadler. His older brother was Lonnie Sadler, was one of the first African-American athletes to play in the SEC. He played at Vanderbilt. But Kente was one of those young men. He averaged, I think he was 9.8 yards a carry for his career. He could do it all. He was a lot like Jaquez Evans, just not as big. Then Rashard Smith, that played for me here in Dublin, was voted Offensive Player of the Year, I think, by the press, and Defensive Player of the Year by the coaches. Went on to NC State and was a two-way player at NC State, one of the first two-way players since the early 80s. He was really good. Eric Walden, obviously, went on, had an 11-year career in the NFL. I only got to coach Eric for 1 year. That was that first year here in Dublin. And we laugh all the time because Eric, when I got here, had been playing free safety. And I told him that we were moving him to five technique. And he proceeded to tell me that he wasn't playing five technique, that he would quit. And I told him to go ahead and turn in his equipment. And so we laugh about it now. I asked him if he would have made all those millions of dollars playing free safety in the NFL, because he was an outside linebacker and an edge guy. But, Eric was obviously really good. And then Jaquez Evans was special. Romello Height had a good career. He's still doing good things in college. Steve Linton is at the NFL Combine last week. I guess, we tell people at the clinics, but it's kind of the way our defense is designed. I've been in Dublin for 23 years now, and every single football player for us that's lined up and played our five technique in our defense has signed and gone on to play somewhere at the next level. So been a lot of great five techniques come through here.
I remember in 2006, I was at Lithia Springs, and we went to West Georgia for a 7-on-7, and y'all came rolling up in there, and somebody made the comment, they're like, what in the world is Coach Holmes doing up here at a 7-on-7? They don't throw but three passes, and y'all won the doggone thing.
Yeah.
Because your defense was so good that nobody could score on them.
And the thing of it is the wing tee itself, Chris, gets a rap. Okay, we can do anything that anybody else can do, but what we try to do is we're going to adapt our system to what our quarterback can do. And when you start talking about back then, I had a quarterback named Ben Cochran who signed and went and played and did well at the Air Force Academy. He could throw the football. He could run the option. He could do it all. And that's where we hang our hat is I don't personally believe that you can line up and just run the true basic wing tee and win championships anymore. That day when you and I probably broke in, everybody said defense wins championships. Well, you can't win a championship without being good on defense. But if you go look at every team that wins a state championship, just pull their season record out. And there's going to be a game where if they didn't score 30 points, they got beat. It might have been a regular season game or it might have been in the playoffs. And if it was a regular season game, then that changes your bracket. and when you're on the road and all that. So you can't win a championship without being good on defense. But you've got to be able to score points now, because there's going to be a night, even though you're good on defense, them suckers are going to get you a number and they're going to put points on the board.
Well, and that leads me into something else that you've been doing over the years, and that's being a servant leader in the coaching world. And talk a little bit about your clinic that you put on every year. I know it's not an exclusively a wing T clinic anymore. It's evolved over the years, but you've got one of the most successful and most regionally well-known clinics that you put on every year.
Well, it started, like you were talking about when we talked about earlier, when I first came to Georgia, the Dublin wing T, which I stole from my mentor, Herschel Moore, and he always gets credit for that now. But I would end up during the off season with 4 or 5 different schools saying, Coach, can we come down this weekend? I'd like to bring my coaches, this, that, and the third, and talk to y'all about what you're doing. The next thing I know, I've never got a weekend off, So I said, why don't we start us a wing T clinic? And I brought Coach Moore down. He was getting toward the end of his run. And we had Robbie Pruitt, Sid Fritz, Steve Pardue. We did a 1-room wing T clinic, and there were about 80 people that showed up. It went pretty good, It really was not about trying to make money. It was just about having a clinic. So we did it the next year, and that place again would only hold 100 people. And it was the only hotel that had a meeting space in Dublin. So we did it the second year, and I had to close the registration. We had more people trying to come than we could host. At that time, said, well, this is growing a little bit. People seem to like it. So we moved it out to the Oconee Fall Line Technical College. And we started doing 3 different speaking rooms. It was all offense. We had a traditional wing T room. That was kind of when Auburn and Clemson and them started running wing T stuff in college out of the gun. So we had a gun hybrid wing T room, and we had a spread room. So there were 3 different offensive rooms. Take your flavor and run with it. And that got to be decent. And so then coaches that had been attending quite regularly come in and they said, hey, why don't you start a defensive room? We'll bring our whole staff. We'd just soon be at this clinic as we had go to Atlanta to the Glacier, because it fits what we need, and we'll bring our whole staff if you can start a defensive room. So that's what we did, and now it's a 4-room clinic. It starts like at 11 on Friday, and we finish it up at 2 o'clock on Saturday. And the year before COVID was its peak. I think we had like 430 coaches there. We've had coaches from 38 different states that have come to Dublin, Georgia for this clinic. And now we've gone on and we've started making it available for people that can't get to Dublin. They could watch it on Facebook live stream. And so it's grown into an annual event. I think we've been doing it now for 17 years, and we enjoy doing it. We get to talk football. We get to visit with people. I'm fortunate enough I get to go around for about the last 20 years, and I'll go speak for the Glacier clinics in different parts of the country. And I just enjoy talking ball and meeting new people and give them the things, it's not what we're doing is the right way, but we'll tell you how we do it. And maybe if there's one thing that helps you, hey, more power to you, because this game of football is different. You know that. Coaches don't mind sharing information. And, or I don't, it's, if you got better players than me and you coached them up well, they probably going to kick our hind end. if we got the better players and we've got them coached up well, we ought to be able to win. So, that's how I look at it.
Well, speaking of which, over the years, who are some of the guys that you've enjoyed competing against and building relationships with across the field? And now you might have got your hind end kicked by them, or you might have kicked their hind end in, but just guys you built relationships over the years that you just really enjoy them and competing against them.
Well, I think when I first got to Dublin, Georgia, one of the guys that I fell in with, really it's because we went over there and beat his hind end, and it wasn't supposed to happen, but it cultivated a great friendship and those type things over the years. And that was Rick Tomlin at Washington County. And we've talked somewhat regularly. Ultimate respect for him. I think a guy that because nobody would play us and he couldn't get anybody to play him, we had a home and away series with Travis Nolan when he was at Stevens County. And we got to be really close friends that talk a lot of ball and those type things. Shucks, I've always enjoyed the opportunity to line up and compete with Maurice Freeman. Gosh, you knew you were in a war when you had to coach against Maurice. And another guy that I had a lot of respect for, and that's put it. I ain't ever beat him or never did beat him, but was Jess Simpson when he was at Buford. The program that he had, the success that they had, you had to admire what they were able to get done with their program there in Buford. And if there's any young coaches out there listening, my best advice to them is have you a close-knit network of people that when you have questions or concerns, it might be about how to deal with a parent situation or whatever. There's those individuals that you got to know and you got to trust and pick up the phone and call them. And you don't have to do what they tell you, but you need to listen because they've been there before and hopefully they might give you a different perspective to look at. And I think that's real important. Another guy that really was a tremendous friend and a guy that we absolutely love to compete with. I've got a lot of his guys on my staff now, and that was Joel Ingram at Washington County. Whenever we weren't in the regions together, we either scrimmaged or we worked together 3 or 4 times during the summer, trying to make each other better. So, Joel's with me now, thank goodness for us. And he brought Brad Wallace with him and Ronald Bonner and Seth Watts, who was on that staff, is now running my middle school program. So I think that in itself tells you the type of respect that we had for those guys when they were at Washington County.
And over the years, you've been doing it a long time, and things have changed a lot. What are some things that you've seen in the game, good, bad, or indifferent, that you like, don't like, or things about the game of high school football that's changed that sometimes you think about, or sometimes
number one, I think the thing that has made it tougher are all the restrictions that we deal with on the practice fields. I'm still old school and will die that way, I guess, or hang up my whistle that way. But it's hard to develop tough, hard-nosed physical kids when you can't go out and practice when it's hot. You can't do 2-a-days and back-to-back days, because the mental part of it that you gain from that has a lot of value, and you can't push to that point anymore based on how our rules are. It's hard to be a real physical football team when you can't have contact. You're limited on the amount of contact that you can have any given week. those things have changed the game quite a bit. Now, one of my major pet peeves, and this is just me, because I'm a wing T guy, we want to block people, knock people off the football, and be physical. Well, all these rules that are not written in the rule book, that teams that run other offenses, especially like the spread, for example, when my kid puts his hand on the ground in a 3-point stance, you know what happens when he moves his shoulders at all? They throw a flag. It's illegal procedure because he moved. A spread team can line down, put their hand on the ground in a 3-point stance, drop all the way down, put their knee on the ground, look around to the sideline or the coach, change the play, and that's not a penalty.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, you're exactly right.
But the rules have been changed without ever being written changed. To me, it's in black and white what the rule book is, but then it comes down to interpretations, or how do we want to, we're not going to call it because they run this type of offense.
Right.
So those things are a little bit hard for me to grasp. When they take away blocking below the waist on the perimeter, it makes it harder. That's what ran several year college teams out of the triple option. They changed their rule now. They can't block below the waist on the perimeter. And it's hard to win those battles at that level. So, I'm whining now and don't really mean to be, but those are the things that have changed so much that you've got to stay on top of your stuff, or you'll get run out of it pretty quick.
Well, Coach, I'm glad you hadn't got run out of it, and I'm glad that you're going to do it as long as you want to. I'll
do it as long as I got asked this question, and this is 2 or 3 years ago. I got asked the question, and you're talking to some old hats and guys that have been doing it a while. So, my question was, they asked me, said, Coach, what do you think's been the most remarkable thing about your career? Well, when I was looking for those jobs, I mentioned when I kept coming to Georgia and interviewing for jobs, one of the first things that I started to notice was either the principal or the superintendent one were in their second year. They didn't make the change as soon as they got hired, but the next year they're hiring a new football coach. They wanted their guy. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah.
They wanted their guy. So that second year, all of a sudden the job would come open. And I said, well, for me, I've only been at 3 schools in 42 years. I chose to leave the first 2. I've had somewhere in the neighborhood of 24 different superintendents and about 30 principals. And I hadn't gotten fired yet.
That's awesome.
That's probably the most remarkable thing that's happened to me in my career, is I haven't had to experience that yet, and I hope to goodness I don't ever have to experience it. There's an old saying in the coaching world, there ain't but 2 kinds of coaches: those that's been fired and those that's going to get fired. And but for the young people out there that want to be head coaches someday, I think there's a reason that is that way. And I look at it in this sense: I'm not the boss of that school system. I answer to a principal and I answer to a superintendent. And when that boss comes in, if they want something done a certain way, I've got 2 choices. I either do it the way they want it done, or I move on.
That's right.
But isn't that the same way that we want our football players to do when we're having to choose who's the starting linebacker and who's the backup linebacker? that coaches get mad when players don't respond a certain way. So understanding your role and the job that you have to do, and if you can build the trust in that administration that you're working for, they're not going to question the things that you're trying to get done, and they're going to hear you when you come to them with things that you need or things, an assistant coach that you think would add value to your staff. And those type things, I think, are all important in being able to maintain the relationships that you need in a particular situation to have success.
So building those relationships with administration, since you've had so many different ones over the years, would you say that's the key?
I think so. And at the end of the day, be brutally honest and treat your kids all fair. If you do that, there's not much else that people, if they don't like the offense you run or the defense you run or whatever, and they want to make a change, so be it. But, just be straight up with people, and when something needs to get done, they'll hear you out, and they can agree or disagree with you, and then that you're in the position now to decide how you want to handle it. Either move on or get it done the way your boss wants it done.
Well, Coach, I sure hope you don't move on anytime soon.
My road's getting short now. I can tell you that.
Yeah, but as long as you want to do it, you ought to be able to do it there. What you've built at Dublin is nothing short of remarkable, coming in with just 20 kids when you first got there to winning 2 state championships and heading directly toward the Georgia High School Hall of Fame, in my opinion. I'm so thankful that you decided to come on and share your story with us tonight.
Well, hopefully somebody got something out of it. Chris, I appreciate you. For years, I don't know if you were doing it back in the day, but whoever used to keep all those jobs posted on the vent, about every one of them that I ever applied for, I saw it on the vent. And I'd start doing some research and decide whether that was something. And, one of my best friends in the state of Georgia that's in the coaching business right now is Rob Ridings. I'm sure you probably know Coach Ridings. And, I remember calling him when the Dublin job was open. And I said, Rob, tell me, Rob and I played together at Middle Tennessee, and said, what about this job in Dublin? And he said, well, Coach, at one time it was a really, really good job. Don't know what's going on, but it's really fallen off in the last few years. But probably be a good job for, if you can get in on it, probably be a good one to take a chance with. And that's, good Lord's kept me here all this time, and it's been a great place for me to raise my family. Both of my kids have gone through the school system. They're both still in Dublin. My son is my offensive coordinator and coaches my quarterbacks and fullbacks. And hopefully one day here soon, he'll have an opportunity. Somebody will want to take a chance on him and see if the things he learned from his dad help him be successful. And the only sad part we got going on right now is nobody wants to hire a guy that runs the wing tee.
Well, I'm sure that'll change. Winning cures all ails, Coach.
Yeah, hopefully, because, that's what I want to do when I retire is go watch him coach somebody. There
you go. I'm sure he's going to put you in the booth.
Well, I probably, if I can still get up there, I probably wouldn't mind it.
Well, thanks, Coach.
All right, buddy. Appreciate you.